the decorative arts and also my own work. But I wanted to start with a bunch of images of things that I found have always inspired me. Talking about artists who inspire me is like an entirely other conversation. And I feel like even within this category of the decorative arts and nature as ornament, I'm only scratching the surface. And I even edited out a lot because I don't want this to be too long. But it's just to sort of share with you some of what I has found have sort of set me on the path of being an artist and how I've been inspired. So okay, here I go. I'm going to try to transition to sharing the screen, and I apologize if anything weird happens. Let's see. Here it is. Okay. Okay, do you see it?
Looks
Okay.
good.
So this is the topic, nature and ornament. And by that, I really mean I'm inspired by the way that artists and artisans have idealized and simplified natural forms to fit them into these pattern systems in architecture, the decorative arts, industrial design. And just in the sense that these artisans have kind of included this theme of nature and sometimes reduced it to something very simplified in order to adorn various buildings and other objects. So this first one, these are not, okay, I have to just use a disclaimer. I'm not an art historian. I'm just a very enthusiastic artist. And if anybody out there is an art historian happens to catch errors in what I'm saying, I apologize. But I just want to sort of give you a little bit of background. This is in Ravenna, Italy. And Ravenna is an important center of late Roman and early Christian monuments, many of which have these incredible intact original mosaics. And this particular one is the mausoleum of Galla Placidia, who was the daughter of a Roman emperor, and she's not actually buried here. I think she's buried in Rome, so it's sort of her symbolic burial place. But I particularly love these Byzantine mosaics. They're made out of these tiny little glass tiles that are called tesserae. And I'm going to show you a picture of those next. But one of the things about, in terms of nature, I just love that the ceiling is kind of covered with this tapestry of these simplified flowers. I really admire the craft and the repeat and just the harmony of the overall piece, the way it fits into this architecture. But one thing about these tiles and this technique that has always inspired me is the way in which light kind of animates them. Because if you walk through a room with these, they flicker and shimmer in much the way if you're walking past a lake and you see sunlight shimmering on the water surface, it kind of sparkles, it's very dynamic. And that's because these tiles are made out of glass that is embedded into the cement kind of in slightly irregular angles. It's not like the way like a shower stall would have very smooth, even tiles. These are put in and they capture the light at slightly different angles. And there's a depth to the gold ones in particular that is because they're made with two little glass tiles and between them is a very thin layer of gold foil. So I'm really interested in gold and in all its applications. And in this case, they are incredibly luminous. There's a kind of glow that emanates because of the way in which the light enters from the sides of the tiles and through the center. These are two examples of different ones from different periods, one from France and one from Italy. And I mean, just in terms of color and the reflective quality, that's something that really inspires me. But then this one, okay, this is the Basilica Santa Maggiore and the Notre Dame de la Garde one. The representation of nature as a powerful and all-encompassing force to kind of give life and provide shelter is a theme that I think is so powerful in these mosaics. And I admire the way in which the artists were able to kind of fill the architectural space in a very planned way so that they create these kind of, especially this one on the left with the acanthus vines or branches. They're supposed to be branches, but the way it creates this intricate web that encompasses everything living within it. I feel like that's a message that really resonates in the way that a lot of artisans and craftspeople would present nature in all its beauty and kind of power to protect and provide life. And then this one, these are frescoes, and I worked for many years as a decorative painter. The technique is basically you're painting into wet plaster. So when it dries, the painting and the wall, the architecture becomes sort of one and the same. And the one on the left in Rome has these little vignettes of historic events. And I appreciate the way these naturalistic vines kind of drape around the chamber in a way just kind of to as a reminder of the sort of eternal presence of the natural world. And they're so beautifully rendered. This is first century. And then the one on the right, I just think these parrots are wacky. I like the way they fit into these. These are supposed to be kind of trompe l'oeil tapestries. They're painted in fresco on the walls of this room in this palazzo in Florence to look like they are wall hangings. And I love the way that they're wedged into the motif. Okay, these, I spent a lot of time when I was growing up in New York going to the Morgan Library, which is really a treasure of a museum. And I think that all of the time I spent looking at these illuminated manuscripts really helped. It was sort of an important formative time for me. I think it's one of the reasons I was interested in drawing and illustration because of the incredible skill and techniques of these craftspeople, the monks and the people who made these books. I think another thing about them that resonates with me as an artist is that they are very small. They're personal prayer books, and there was something about the intimate scale. I work very small, and I always find these fascinating. And these books are gems because each page is its own individual original painting. And in terms of nature, I just love the way these patterns are kind of incorporated as a means to support and frame the text. But to me, they're just equally important. And then the application of gold leaf at the end as an embellishment. Once again, I'm always sort of interested in the ways that artists have used gold. And they're kind of burnished, so they have a shine to them that really stands out. These were made using vellum, which is a kind of parchment. And today, if you go to the art supply store and you get a pad of paper that's called vellum or parchment, you just get like a really stiff paper. But these were actually made with calf skin that would be scraped down and stretched to dry, and then treated. The surface would be treated to smooth it and bleach it in order to prepare it for the very detailed and delicate line work and painting that the makers of these books would apply. These are two different Qurans, but it's the same thing. I just think these are exquisite, and the tapestry-like motif of the flowers in the page on the right is just so beautiful and amazing to see the repeated detail of these flowers that really do kind of reappear in a very kind of regular but earthy kind of repeated pattern. I love the luster of the gold in this Quran. The European prayer books often have a highly burnished gold, which I think is fascinating, but this particular one just speaks to me because it's kind of muted and there's a subtleness to it that is just really inspiring. And then this is totally jumping to something else, but okay, I am not a specialist in this area of Pueblo pottery, but these are functional pots, and I really appreciate the way in which they have taken all of these natural elements such as rain, thunder, clouds, mountains, and all of these different natural phenomena and elements of the landscape and reduce them into an iconography that is so kind of geometric and simplified. Just a very different take on nature. And the palette is very harmonious because these are slip clay paints that are painted on the pots after they're dry. And I just really like how kind of timeless and geometric these patterns are, but they all have a significance and refer to the importance and power of water as a life-giving force and of nature in general. And these two are Japanese lacquerware. And the lacquer, this thing on the left is called an inro. It's a personal container that someone would wear suspended from their sash, their obi on their kimono. And it would, I don't know what they would carry inside it, but they're just these very small. Once again, I'm just drawn to small things because the painting on it is just so exquisite and kind of miniaturized. I find that really intriguing. And so the artist would paint layer upon layer of this lacquer, and the lacquer is made of sap from a tree. And um, because the layers are sort of dry in between applications, there was a buildup of this lacquer that it just has this kind of luminous depth to it. It's not like painting something black. It's got a richness to it that is very mysterious when you see it in person. Um, and the little fob at the top, I think it's fascinating to know that that's made out of a peach pit that's been embellished with tortoiseshell and mother of pearl and painting. I mean, it's just such a delicate, exquisite object, but it's just this very humble thing. And then on the right, this depiction of water in the same inlay and lacquer technique from the 12th century. I like the way the water has been sort of overtaken the entire container, and it just carries your eye around in such a fluid and graceful way. The next one is, I felt like this kind of related to the last one, because maybe I was so inspired by books as objects when I was younger. I had this incredible opportunity to work as an assistant to a bookbinder in New York, who taught me a bit about tooling leather. Unfortunately, it turned out I'm allergic to the hoof and hide glue that is used to bind the books. So it was such a fun job, but I would come home every day with swollen hands, so it was just not for me. But again, I really I love the way these forms have just been engineered to carry your eye around and fill the space. They're in service to the design, and for that reason, they are tweaked and kind of simplified in certain ways, and just so graceful. Okay, jumping to jewelry just quickly because I this one on the left is from the 19th century. It's incredible to me. It looks like it could be made now. And these are jasmine buds. And once again, just taking a natural element and sort of simplifying it, idealizing it into this motif that could be repeated, and combined with rubies in this case, is just, this object is just so beautiful. And then the one on the right, unfortunately, a friend told me that she thought that these earrings were the shape of the coronavirus. So I kind of can't unsee that now, but I really love these because they look like seed pods. They're made with filigree, another technique that is kind of fascinating, with wires that are soldered and melted to these forms to create these incredible textures. But the shape of those earrings and the pattern sort of speaks to me when I'm making my drawings. I feel like there's a lot of that kind of repetition and observing a form, but then recreating it and capturing the imperfection where it exists too. Tiffany, sort of iconic artisan, he created this form of glass that was called Favril glass. Typically, during this era, any kind of iridescent glass would be painted, but he invented and patented this formula to make this glass that where the iridescence was kind of embedded within the material. And for that reason, when you see them in person, there are a lot of them at the Met. They are just so otherworldly. There's something about the glow and the luster that really speaks to me. And then I just appreciate this Art Nouveau depiction of nature. It's always very graceful and flowing, kind of leads your eye around. This is because I put this in because I worked for many years as a gilder, and Vari-Glos is a technique where you are basically reverse painting. You paint the negative space of the motif on the glass, and once it's dry, you lay in gold or platinum or silver leaf. It's kind of a painstaking process, and sometimes artisans will just make mirrors without decorations, but I did a lot of work with repeated florals on borders, a lot like these. And I think one of the reasons that I love doing it, I want to add also that I, for many years, was so fortunate to work for a contemporary artist who uses a lot of gold leaf in his paintings and drawings. And he had a different method that was kind of adapted to the materials he needed to use for his work. And so I was able to work in the both very traditional gilding, glass gilding, and then this contemporary version. In both ways, it aligned with my enjoyment of working really slowly. It's very painstaking to do gilding, and it just kind of always felt like a fit for me. It's not only felt right to me because of how I'd always liked to draw, but I think in a lot of ways it helped inform how I work now because of that sort of slowing down and meditative process that you have to kind of get your head in when you are working in this medium. Um, this is this is a kind of Italian lace making that is called oh my God, it's stitches in the air is how it translates. And I'm just amazed by the skill of the artisans who make these and repeat the designs, but also the lace. So there's so much about the lace motif is about the negative space. And that's something that is really important to me when I'm making my drawings. I think a lot about not only the elements, but what's happening between the elements. This is the last one for decorative art stuff. But I worked as I sound like I've had a million jobs. I have had a lot of jobs. I worked as a textile designer and studying design, especially florals when I was in school. We talked a lot about the difference between symmetry and balance. This one on the left is a design by William Morris. It's actually his birthday today. And he made these very jigsaw puzzle like motifs that were always, well, most of the time were mirror image like this. But the one on the right is a drawing that is a lot about how nature has to be engineered to fit into a composition. So they are naturalistic looking, but then the artist would always have to tweak it, fake things, move buds and flowers around so that in the service to the pattern, there would be a harmony and balance that made sense and also functioned as a repeat. And so in my drawing, I feel like I think a lot about that, how to play with the necessity of having a sense of balance, but also push it to the edges. This is sort of like a weird bridge piece. This is a drawing I did in 2002. And during the time I was thinking about the idealization of nature in design and how I wanted to contrast it with these natural elements in all of their reality and maybe modesty. So I had combinations of these French details from these French textiles and then sort of juxtaposed with things like almond pits and things like that, almond shells. So this is the drawing that's in the show. And I want to just make sure that I don't forget to say a few things about these because there's so much. I feel like one of the things about what I do is that I'm much more interested in working on subject matter that is the kind of overlooked subjects in nature and botany. I love planned gardens, ornamental plants, and all of that. I think they're beautiful. But what really speaks to me is the more modest plants, the weeds and wildflowers that kind of pop up on the edges. Sometimes the unwelcome plants, but the ones that are sort of less valued. I feel like in my work, I really try to observe them and respectfully and hopefully elevate them through this kind of attention and observation to highlight their beauty and value. And this is from Orion magazine. They published a couple of my drawings a couple of years ago, and I work in gold. I feel like gold point is a medium that I enjoy matching with this subject matter. These are weeds and kind of humble wildflowers. And I like to kind of render them using this precious metal. And the drawing technique requires me to work slowly. And so there's something about the combination of the attention, the time, and the medium that feel like the appropriate way to render these plants. The gold kind of turns on and off depending on the way the light hits it. And that's something that has always interested me in the mosaics. That's kind of an example of that. I feel like this is Um, it's a characteristic of gold that is kind of unique, and it can be difficult to manage. Sometimes I burnish areas of my drawings, sometimes I don't. And I like the sort of possibility that they can shift and change depending on how you view them. Um, I also like to use the buds and the seed heads together. There's something about the kind of life cycle that I'm thinking about when I'm making them that I feel it's important. There's a kind of poignancy in the dandelion seed heads. It's sort of the past the bloom, and it's before the plant has finished its growing cycle. And it's in spite of all the attempts to eradicate this plant, it just continues to try to propagate and survive in the world. And there's something about that that I just feel is very poignant. This is one that I did on blue. I'm experiment a lot because it's a difficult medium to get right. And I was interested to try color, but I realized that certain colors were too saturated and kind of tried to upstage the gold. So I wanted to push them back. So this is a blue that's almost so neutral, it almost is like a black, but I really wanted to combine some color in this one. This one was in a show at the New York Historical Society about silhouettes, which meant a lot to me because what I mentioned this before, but negative space is really important element to me when I'm composing my drawings. I'm thinking not only about what I'm going to draw, but about the intervals between things and how that's the tension of the spaces in between the objects that exist in the picture. This is graphite. Graphite looks just like kind of white in pictures, but it has a real beautiful luster to it that I particularly appreciate. And we were talking about earlier, looks like silver, but it's graphite. This is a piece that I did for a show called Plant Cure that, and it's a series of graphite drawings on panels. And I was trying to imagine the way a botanist would have a vasculum, which is their cylindrical field sample collections box, and how they would need to collect every part of the plant. I know for those of you studying scientific illustration, botanical painting, you know, you really need to represent every part of the plant, not just the sort of glorious flower, but the roots and all of the other elements. And so I just wanted to try to create this collection of glimpses of the different part of the plant and treat it as objects. So they were displayed in a display case as if they were botanical samples. Grasses this is another theme that really means a lot to me. I think the grasses kind of are an opportunity for me to think about the rhythm of these plants. All of these plants have a kind of basic structure that doesn't change, but within the foundation forms, the plants have so much variation and irregularity is not quite the right term, but unpredictability. And so I really like to play with the idea of sort of pattern and rhythm and the expected and the unexpected when I'm working on the grasses. Sometimes they're very thin and sometimes they're more dense. Just again, thinking about the possibility of this repeated motif, but how in reality, as in our world, so much might feel the same on the surface, but there's so much kind of subtle variation within categories people consider to be one set thing. And I like drawing these also because I feel like when I'm working on these, I get kind of lost in the weaving of the grass blades. These are two, the one on the left is gold and the one on the right is graphite. And I wanted to just add these silver point. This is silver point, and it's a medium that I really like working in. I particularly focus on drawing feathers. Right now, that is really interesting to me. I think when I pick up these feathers that I find on the ground, there's something about their fragility and the sort of beauty and ephemeral quality of these little treasures that have kind of fallen off birds. They've no longer they're no longer useful to the bird, and in time they are going to decay and disintegrate. And there's something about the kind of delicate glow of silver point that feels to me matched to this subject when I'm drawing them. And silver oxidizes in time. I spray my drawings to try to keep that from happening too quickly. But again, I think about time and sort of the ephemerality of the subject, as well as the way in which the medium itself will change as it is exposed to light and air and time. And that's my last one. So thank you very much for looking at my slides. I'm going to turn off my share if I can. Can I do it? Let's see. Uh-oh. Hold on a sec. I'm sorry. There. Okay. Hi.
Wonderful.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm a little clunky.
Oh, it was relaxing just to see your work and the other things that inspired you.
Oh, well, thank you. There's so much there. I get carried away. I edited out a million things. I mean, there's the hinges. I live in an old Victorian house, and our hinges are etched with these beautiful leaf motifs. And I was going to go take a picture of that, and I thought, oh my God, these poor people. It's like only so much you want to look at. So, but you get the idea. I mean, there's so much more. It's more like an introduction to things everyone, I'm sure, sees stuff like this every day, but there's so much to find and be inspired by.
So true.
So thank you.
No, but don't worry. I don't think many of us get tired of that exquisite delicateness of those drawings. They're
Thank you.
they're endlessly fascinating, and the point that yes, they do react to light. At times they kind of light up and then they'll dim down. Even the that simple, humble graphite has some wonderful qualities like that.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of another layer of its presence, because it can give you more or less depending on where you stand and what the light source is. And I feel like it sort of gives it a way of being interactive. So, but thank you.
Well, the evolving too, you've made a good point about the silver point. Well, that'll blacken over time. So there's this sort of evolution of the
Yeah.
drawing itself.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's also makes it difficult when I'm drawing, because sometimes I'm impatient to put down a darker line, but I have to remember that the surface can only take so much anyway, but also it's not going to give me that until later on. And so I have to be sort of okay with a silvery light gray, and it's sort of something to look forward to see what happens. I try to fix them so they don't do it in a kind of uncontrolled way. Who knows? We'll give it time and see how they age. But
it'd be kind of fun just to, well, let it happen if it's going to happen.
Right.
And an understanding that, it has this wonderful delicateness now, but it's going to become bolder as it ages.
Yeah. And when you're drawing, unlike working with charcoal or graphite, where you can sort of darken and build up, there's really a limit to how much you can do with silver point. So you just have to trust in that process and let it take the time.
Yeah, well, a hard graphite will do that too. You can only go so dark, and you just keep burnishing it after that.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know how dark? Do you have a sense of what it's going to look like over time?
Well, at the Smith Museum, I took a course that was in historic artist materials, where we kind of examined all of these different techniques and processes, and they have some drawings on display. And one of them was maybe, I don't remember how many hundreds of years old, but it looked like dark pencil. It didn't look, it looked like not jet black, but it looked like a sort of, like a dark, I don't know, a 6B. And it just had a kind of depth to it that when I make these drawings, there's almost like a bluish cast to them. They're not there yet. I don't know how long it'll take, but I see that, over time, especially if they're not sprayed, they would eventually get very dark. the Met has a lot of silver point drawings in their old master drawing collection. And, but sometimes they're drawn on colored paper. So it's almost harder to tell exactly. I mean, you know, they're not necessarily on white. So, but they do darken and they start to look like a dark pencil line, basically.
I
Yeah.
have a few questions. So what do you spray your artwork with to kind of fix it? And what is the surface that you're working on?
Okay. Well, with the spray, do not use regular like workable fixative or anything, because I have had a horrible experience or two where I had what I thought was a good finishing one, but because I'm working on a dark ground, I sprayed and it just cast like a gazillion tiny sparkly dots of white that hardened and dried on the surface and ruined the drawing. So there are blanking. I think it's Lascaux. There's a brand that makes a very nice fixative that is completely clear and not shiny, and supposedly seals. I seal my stuff with it, but sometimes it will dull things, so then I have to burnish them a little bit. As far as surfaces, I've been experimenting a lot. When you're working with metal point, you have to give the surface, you have to prepare the surface so that there's a tooth to it. And that is how, when you drag the, I have my little stylus here. This is my silver point stylus. So this is the metal, and when you drag it across the surface, it needs to have something to catch on. So when I was at Smith, we did the traditional Chinini. I probably pulled this out to show you. This is the traditional formula for preparing for metal point drawing, and I think that you might have to use lead white or other things, but you mix a kind of powdery substance and a glue like rabbit skin glue, and then prepare the surface with that. You have to put down a few thin layers. You can't use, like for my dark ones, I've tried mixing, tinting, I've tried paint. You can't use something slippery like acrylic paint, because it will, it's just too smooth, too shiny. So I try various things, but with the silver point, you can actually use, it's like a cooking show. I should have had my stuff here. You can buy a prepared silver point ground and paint it on. But you can also make a mix. This is a mix that is, I think it's like a formula that it simulates the lead white, but it might be some kind of like calcium carbonate or something, and then
It's a little safer.
and so you need to just prepare the surface so it's smooth, so you don't have brush marks or ridges or anything like that. It will show up in your drawing. And the thing about it also is that once the surface has been prepared, it's very susceptible to staining. So when I'm drawing, I can't lean on my drawing. You can't put your hand down like the way I would like to draw with graphite. I usually put something to protect the paper. With silver point, I've had this happen several times where I'm drawing and then I accidentally pick it up and touch the surface of the white, and then it transfers either the oil from my fingers or traces of the silver dust that have been kind of blowing in a kind of microscopic way on the surface and get sort of stuck to it. And so it's not a forgiving medium, and you just have to, I lose a lot. I don't make a lot of drawings. I feel like I start a lot and some of them don't survive the process because I want them to be clean and not have hazes and kind of halos. And so that's that. But I do recommend that if someone is, spraying silver point and gold point, you just have to use something that you test on something else. And I think it's Lascaux that makes a nice one that is archival and safe.
Yeah, sometimes the best fixative is no fixative, though, just because of how the fixative itself will interact with the paper even.
Yeah. And don't spray indoors, kids. So yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. That was very interesting. Do any of my students have any questions?
It's okay if you don't. I feel like I talked a lot.
I actually had a little one about how you get your reference.
Oh, yeah. When I'm painting, you mean with like my dandelions? Um,
Yeah.
I go out, well, if I go out and I take a lot of pictures. So, and I live in New England, so I kind of have to stock up. So as soon as dandelions start growing, I and I have dogs, so I walk my dogs. I basically always bring my phone with me so that while I'm walking the dogs or taking a walk anywhere, I can just be taking pictures. I I feel like as an artist, I should use my own reference. So I try to really stick to only things I can find that I have seen with my own eyes and documented. And sometimes when it's so frustrating, sometimes I'll bring things in to draw and they'll dry up, and then people, sometimes family members might think that they're garbage or like a dead bouquet, and they disappear, and then I have to wait for more things to come into my studio and die and dry up. But mostly I work from pictures. I actually did early on in the process try to pot some dandelions and have them sitting on my desk, and it it didn't really work that well. And I also had the slapstick experience of holding a dandelion and like sneezing and blowing the seeds over my studio, so that didn't work. um, what do though is a lot of my pictures I use as a departure point, and they're not literal copies of the pictures I take, they're just reference. So in the same way that in those mosaics where the artisans kind of fake the design to fit the space, I will sort of take creative license and just change the composition of the plant so that so it fits with what I really am trying to express. So that, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I take pictures.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
I can't think of any other thing I forgot to tell you. I mean, that's kind of it. I mean, there I continue to work on these, and it's really, I'm so grateful to have the chance to show my work in this context of this show that you put together, because there's so many different takes on nature and precise drawing and observation. And I sometimes feel, I think a lot of artists feel this way, that you're kind of alone in your own orbit working, especially working with very small detail and kind of the mindset that it takes to get into this frame of mind to be working in the studio. So I love the connection of being included in something with other artists who are approaching it, their point of view is slightly different, but that same practice, because it's very solitary to be making work that's, kind of quiet and slow. And it's always great to feel like you're part of a community of people out there. Everyone's in their own little garrets doing their thing. So I'm interested to see the work of the other artists too when I get to come to the gallery in person.
I feel the same way. It's nice to know that there's a community of other artists out there that have this appreciation for science and nature, and
Mhm.
and that we can come together and kind of share what we do.
Yeah. And I think compared with you and artists who are doing very precise, accurate observation, I'm kind of a cheater, because my take on it is I'm kind of taking the parts of the plants and not really telling the truth entirely. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing sort of what you're doing, but adjacent. And I would hate for anyone to refer to my work with any expectation of seeing like a really informative, accurate, scientific depiction of the plants. I'm like sort of riffing on it, going off on my own tangent. And that's why, I mean, I appreciate being included with this other work that is so precise and accurate and kind of carefully observing the plant.
Well, I kind of feel the same way you do. you do the best you can, and
Mhm.
hope that you've touched on everything that needs to be touched on, and it is as accurate as it can be.
Mhm. Yeah. And
Yeah,
there's
I apologize. I apologize for coming late to the show. I got distracted with some other things, but I just want to say your image is very beautiful. It was used on the brochure and
Oh yeah,
everything.
thank you. And I'm so happy to be in the show with you. And I looked at your website and I really admire your work. So it's nice to say hello here.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I've never done silver point. It looks like it would be a fascinating medium to try. I know scratch board's a lot of fun. And
Hmm.
Trudy Nicholson with GNSI used to do some amazing work.
Hmm.
And you were talking about networking. Is there any special way that you maintain connections with other artists? Or
Well, I have a lot of friends who are artists, and I don't know, I've met them along the way. I met them in college and after school. I worked in galleries in New York when I lived in New York. I worked for an artist and worked in a lot of galleries and just kept meeting. My husband's an artist. Met a lot of people, and then through different shows, I've been able to meet such interesting, talented artists. And I don't know, I mean, it's just kind of crossing paths in ways like this. And I'm shy about social media, but I reluctantly do it because there are a lot of artist friends who are there and they're showing their work there. So I've learned so much and connected with so many people through that as well. Um, and it is so bolstering to connect with other artists and feel like, I look at art history, there's so much that artists have done, but it's exciting to know that right now there's so many people out there continuing to make new work and um, kind of crossing paths in different kinds of themes and subjects that resonate with me. And it's just exciting. So kind of just, I think through show all of those things, if that isn't too much of a soup, that's like, I feel like it's a combination of all of that. Um, and I feel like this has been a weird year with everything online. I've been at several shows this year that were closed. They were online only. And it was still very exciting to be a part of them. But it's kind of interesting to see what happens once life reopens and how this other dimension now of these online opportunities and events, which I guess existed before, but how much they'll stay with us and people will use them, because it does allow us all to connect across time zones and continents. So
yeah, that's been a fun thing. And artists, like writers, are kind of reclusive by nature, so it's important for us to get out there and connect for sure.
yeah, definitely. It's heartening because we all need our time to work, but it still is uplifting to know that there are other like-minded people are out there doing their own thing, but sort of it's like parallel play.
Mhm.
So yeah.
What struck me listening to your talk is how you've had a lot of different types of artistic experiences and jobs, and you bring it all together. It's kind of like a building of your artistic endeavors, and everything you've done before is informing what you're doing now.
Hmm. I think I'm glad that you see it that way. It doesn't sound like so like Bumble keeps changing jobs. Um, but yeah, I mean it's funny how everything is this sort of like a connection. I think I've always been curious to learn more. I continue to want to learn how to do more things, and I feel like I wanted to try things and develop the skills, and I had this incredible set of opportunities to work with all these people who helped teach me and opened up my eyes to how things could be made. And it has really given me a lot to as sort of jumping off point. And but I continue. I mean, I'm always trying to learn more. I feel like there's just so much to do, and I each time I feel like I start getting comfortable with the technique, I just get curious about seeing what else how else I could sort of push it. But I'm trying not to move too fast because I'm still struggling to get this stuff done. And but yeah, there's all of these decorative arts. I mean, they're not only the decorations, but they're the methods that people use to make them that I find really fascinating, almost equally fascinating. It's not just depictions of nature, but just how people made things. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, everyone. I really appreciate having the opportunity to share with you, and happy to answer other questions, but if you don't have any, I can't think of anything else to say.
Thank you so much, Margo.
Thank you,
Thank
Margo.
you. And we
Thank
have
you.
your email. If anything, we can be in touch.
All right. Well, I hope you all have a great day, and thank you, students and teachers and artists, for being with me. I really appreciate having the chance